Hello, and welcome to the information session for the Masters in Criminal Justice program at the University of Winnipeg. I'm Dr. Michelle Bertrand, and I am a professor and the chair of the graduate program for the Criminal Justice Department. I will be diving into the information session right away, and I just wanted to give you a quick heads up that in true professor fashion, I've managed to mess something up on the technological front. So I do have a former student of our program who did the information session with me, and somehow I managed to record only the video of her, and there's zero video of me in there. But you can hear the whole conversation. You're still going to hear my voice. So this is just a very quick introduction to let you know why you're not going to be seeing me, but you're going to hear my voice more than anything else, and why you're not going to see video of anyone except for one person who is not me. So this is my way of introducing myself and to give you a heads up about something you're going to see in the video or not see, as the case may be. Hello, and welcome to the information session for the Masters in Criminal Justice program. This will be for the September 2025 intake at the University of Winnipeg. And my name is Dr. Michelle Bertrand. I'm a professor and graduate program chair, and I will let my colleague Danielle introduce herself.
Hi, my name is Danielle Hermann. I am a former master's student, a former thesis student of Dr. Bertrand's, and yeah, very excited to chat about the program that I really loved.
All right, well, that's amazing. And so I'm going to attempt to share my screen now, and we'll see how that goes. As we know, technology is every professor's downfall pretty much at some point. So I'm going to share my screen here. And luckily I have someone else here who can confirm. Danielle, does it look like I've shared my screen properly?
Looks good to me, yes.
All right. Okay, so as you can see, this just repeats the information about what this is going to be about. And the format of the session is going to be some introductions. We'll tell you a little bit more about ourselves. I'll talk about some of the program details, so some of the general structure of the program, what streams we offer, what kind of courses you might be taking, some research topics that our previous students have completed. Also talk about funding and tuition, because obviously finances is an important part of considerations for any graduate program. I'll also talk about the minimum eligibility requirements and application requirements, and then talk a little bit about what can you do with a criminal justice master's. And so it's great that we have a recent graduate here who can tell you one of the things that you can do with a criminal justice master's. And all right, so I think without further ado, I will go into talking a little bit about who we are and then dive right into the topics. And also just a note too, this will be a little bit more conversational. So if you prefer to like listen to this more of like a podcast style, you can absolutely do that. We will have some slides that will be it'll have some information on there that you might want to look at, but you could absolutely just have a listen to this and go back and look at any slides where you want any specific pieces of information. All right, so as I mentioned, I'm Dr. Michelle Bertrand. I am a professor and I'm also chair of the graduate program, pardon me, in the Criminal Justice Department. I am a social psychologist by training, but my research focuses on the criminal justice system, and specifically my research is in the area of Canadian juries and on eyewitness memory. And as Danielle mentioned, she is one of our recently graduated master's students, so I will let her introduce herself as well.
Yeah, thanks. So, like I said before, my name is Danielle Hermann. I completed a BA honors in psychology at U of W, graduated in 2020, and then kind of switched gears a little bit and moved into the criminal justice stream. And I was a thesis student in the master's program, graduated in 2023. And my research area was, well, because I was Dr. Bertrand's thesis student, I did my research in the jury-related field, looking at why Manitobans request exemption from jury service. So after my graduate degree, I worked for Dr. Bertrand as a research associate for about a year or so, and now I am working for the Manitoba government as a policy analyst in the public safety division.
All right, great. Thanks, Danielle. And one of the reasons we like to have a former student to talk to you about the program as well, and to have these kind of conversations, is so you can get the perspective from a student as well, what it is like to be in the program. And as you can see, we have successfully launched her into employment afterwards, and yeah, so we'll be talking some more about that throughout as well. So I thought, for those of you who are not exactly familiar with what criminal justice is, I'd start with a little bit of a description about what it is as a discipline. And I'll say up front that this can actually be somewhat of a difficult question to answer in some ways, because if you look at criminal justice programs across Canada or even in the States, you're going to find some of these programs look pretty different from each other. But what I can tell you is how our program looks at criminal justice, or you'll hear us calling it CJ for short, which is that it's an applied area that focuses on the operation of the criminal justice system. So these would be things like policing, courts, corrections, community initiatives, anything that involves the operation of the system. And we see criminal justice as focusing less on crime and criminality, which is what you'll typically see criminologists studying. And CJ is an area that is known for being what's called interdisciplinary, meaning that the faculty and the graduate students are from many different academic areas. So this could include, for example, law or legal studies, geography, education, psychology, sociology, criminology, and history. And it's a different kind of department because, so for example, as I mentioned, I'm a social psychologist by training. And so anyone who's in a psych department would typically have very similar training and very similar skill sets in terms of what we call the methodological toolbox. But they would be applying those skills, those similar sets of skills to different areas of study, and some can be quite different areas of study. Whereas in an interdisciplinary department like criminal justice, we all share a common general area of study, the criminal justice system, and we use different methodological toolboxes that we developed in our home disciplines to undertake our research and to develop a deeper understanding of the criminal justice system. So we have this common area of interest, but different methodological and theoretical approaches to studying this particular system. And researchers in criminal justice use a variety of quantitative and qualitative methods in undertaking the research that they do. And you can see what I mean about the interdisciplinary nature of our department based on the backgrounds of some of our faculty. So we have 13 faculty in total who teach at both the undergraduate and graduate level. And as I said, we all have the same area of study, the criminal justice system. And we have some researchers who are primarily quantitative researchers, some who are primarily qualitative, and some researchers who are also mixed methods researchers and engage in both qualitative and quantitative areas of study. And what I've got here are the people who are supervising, who are not, and versus who are not supervising students, or who are not accepting students for supervision for next year. And so for those of us who are not accepting supervision, we didn't deserve photos on the slides, and also because there's too many people to fit on the slide anyways, and it's a little bit easier to keep the distinction for everybody. So from year to year, some faculty may not be available to take on supervision of new students. And so you can see here we have 8 faculty who are accepting students for supervision for next year, and we have 5 faculty who are not accepting students for supervision. If you wanted to find out more about a particular faculty member and their research, you can visit our website for more information. Just click on the faculty profile and you can find out more information that way. And this may lead to a question about what exactly is a supervisor. And I've gotten this question a few times, and so I'll sort of describe what this is, and Danielle, I'll probably be asking you what your experience of having a supervisor was. No pressure, because as she said, I was her supervisor. But basically, a supervisor is a faculty member who's got expertise in your research area. And this is basically like a mentorship or an apprenticeship. And this is someone who guides you through the process of completing your thesis or knowledge synthesis project, depending what stream you're in. And all of our faculty, all of our students coming into our master's program, regardless of what stream, they do need a faculty member willing to act as their supervisor. And I guess the best way to describe it is like, you think you've done a term paper, you think you're like, this is just a big paper. Danielle, is this just a big paper?
No, it is not. I mean, technically, yes, it is, but it there's a lot that goes into it. It's a lot of time. It's a lot of reading and editing and going over it. There's a lot to it. So no, it's not just a big paper.
Yes. And it's something where, and so maybe Danielle, can you talk as well? Like, so what was it like having a supervisor throughout the process? Like, do you feel like you could have done this without a supervisor?
Absolutely not. Um, so I think a lot of that has to do with, I think, our communication styles really aligned as well. And I think so. I guess I'm gonna touch on the second point quickly. So, um, should you contact your or you should contact your prospective supervisor before applying. So that was something that I did ahead of time. I kind of did my own homework, I'll call it, and kind of looked at, different faculty members' bios online, looked at their research areas, and if my research interests aligned, then okay, that's somebody that I might reach out to, see if they're accepting students, if they're willing to take me on as a thesis student. So I think um, ultimately that's how we kind of connected was my research interests really aligned with the work that you do. And then I think that's a really important part of the student supervisor relationship because really if you're a student not interested in what you're going to be living and breathing for the next essentially 2 years, then you're going to have a tough time. So yeah, I think it was a really great experience working with you. And, I think we had a really good method of communication and check-ins. And, you were there for guidance, but also let me work independently. And it's all about kind of fostering that sort of relationship with your supervisor and seeing what kind of techniques and methods of communication and I guess collaboration work for you. And I think, that leads to a really positive experience. So
That's great. And just in case anyone watching this is wondering, no, I didn't bring Danielle on just to ask her to say nice things about me. But all the things that Danielle talked about, I can say right back at you in terms of like having a really great working relationship, and that it really is important that you do have a really good alignment between what your interests are and what your supervisor's research expertise is. And if you think about it, it's kind of like an apprenticeship where you see someone doing something that, hey, like that looks pretty cool. I'd like to learn how to do that. Can I come work with you and learn from your experience? And so the reason why we have supervisors for our master's students is because doing a thesis or a knowledge synthesis project, it's a much bigger thing than just writing like your standard like 10 to 12 page end of term paper kind of thing. So this is something where you do need some guidance, you do need feedback, and you get a lot of individualized attention from your supervisors in working through this process. And as Danielle said, and it's, on the screen here too, it's like, it's really a good idea to contact prospective supervisors before you apply, whether it's at criminal justice masters at U Winnipeg or at a different program. It's always good to introduce yourself, and one, you'll find out if this person is accepting students for year. When I was a grad student, I contacted some people and they weren't accepting students when I was looking to start school. And so then, your search changes based on what options are available to you. And it could be the case that they say, you know what, I'm not accepting students, or hey, I don't think we'd be a great fit, but maybe they'd have some suggestions, maybe they'll shoot you a suggestion about something else that you might want to be doing, or who else you might be able to contact. So it's always good to contact prospective supervisors. Just say, hey, this is who I am. This is what my background is. Here's what my research interests are. Would you be open to possibly supervising me as a student? And so this is why it's really good to know what a supervisor is and how they function within the program. So they're kind of a mentor and a guider, and working with them as a mentor. So I've talked about thesis and knowledge synthesis project, and because it's hard to say knowledge synthesis project so many times, we just call it the KSP. That rolls off the tongue much more easily. So that's who we are and what we study, and I'll talk about the program details. So we do offer both full and part-time options for the program. If you are full-time, the expected time to completion is 2 years. If you're part-time, the expected time to completion is 4 years. And this is where you're going to be doing some work towards your degree completion throughout the entirety of the years. So unlike in undergrad where you kind of get your summers off, we'll say, if you're not taking any classes, you are expected to be a student throughout the whole year. and you'll be paying tuition throughout the whole year. So you want to make sure you're doing that work to maximize that value. We do have two streams, so the thesis stream and the KSP stream. And students in the KSP stream still do have a major paper. The difference is that the thesis is a lot bigger in scope and length than a KSP. And the KSP does not require original data collection. And the reason for this, so the thesis, there is original data collection. What that looks like is going to be different from student to student. A KSP is which knowledge synthesis project is if you're that student, you're like, just find me like that meta-analysis, just find me that scoping review or that systematic review that tells me kind of the general state of a field. That's what a knowledge synthesis project is. It's a way of taking an existing body of knowledge and synthesizing it to figure out are the overall conclusions or the general patterns in a particular area. And so this gives you a lot of really valuable skills as well. But it kind of really depends on what your interests lie in terms of which one will be the better fit for you. So you develop great skills that are valuable either way, and it just kind of depends what your focus is and what your interests are. Additional differences are that students in the thesis stream take a total of 6 courses. So it's our 4 required courses plus 2 electives. And then the KSP students take the same 4 required courses, but they do 4 electives. And so basically you still have the same number of credit hours, but the students in the thesis stream are expected to be doing a much bigger project. And so the thesis is worth more towards degree completion. Speaking of courses offered, so the required courses that all students in all of our streams take are conceptualizing criminal justice, constitutional issues and criminal law, research design, and criminal justice policy. For the electives, as I mentioned, the thesis students have to do 2 electives and the KSP students do 4 electives. And so we've had a few different electives throughout the years, preventing wrongful convictions, qualitative and visual methods, critical criminal justice theory, colonialism and criminal justice, supremacism and ideologically motivated violent extremism, penology, and ethnography, which is new this year. And so we do not offer all of these every year. So basically the electives that we offer are offered on rotation. And so the ones that you see up here may not be the ones that you're going to be taking. So again, we do not offer all of these every year. There's also a possibility to take courses in other departments at the University of Winnipeg, as long as they're applicable to the criminal justice masters. So this could be something that's topically related, or it could be, for example, if you want to take like a methodology course of some kind or a statistics course or something that relates to the process of doing research. There's also something called the Western Dean's Agreement, where you can take courses through another university without having to pay tuition at the other university. And it's a course sharing agreement between Western universities. So there's a few different ways to get additional electives if there's something else that you're looking for in terms of interest-wise or skill-building-wise. Can be a way to broaden your course options and possibly take a course that we don't offer that would be helpful for your own research. And thesis students normally do all of their coursework in the first 2 semesters, so 3 courses in the fall, 3 courses in the winter, and the KSP students spread out their coursework over both years, but should ideally be finished the coursework in the fall term of their second year. And Danielle, maybe you can sort of comment on how busy is it taking, like you're like, it was like 3 courses, whatevs, right? But what is it like taking 3 graduate level courses at the same time?
It's very busy. So it's not like taking, your undergraduate courses, where I think when I was an undergrad, I did 4 courses per term, which, isn't even quite a full course load, but this was definitely much busier than, that extra undergrad course per term. So yeah, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of it requires a lot of discipline and focus, but it's you learn so much, and it's so interesting, and it's great to collaborate with other students and professors, and kind of hear about different perspectives and opinions, and generate some good discussion about these topics. And some of these topics are really interesting and new to me. So lots of great options. But yes, to answer your question, it's very busy.
Yeah,
but
well,
it's
and
doable.
doable, but like busy. And like I said, you do have to
Yes.
be disciplined and keep on top of things. And Danielle, it's so that you mentioned like the discussion part of things and learning and talking to other people. That's actually a really great segue into the format of the class because most of our classes are what we call seminar classes. And this means that they're primarily discussion based instead of lecture based. And the room that you can see on the slide there, that's a typical room that you would see in terms of a discussion room. So sort of like a rectangle. I won't call it a circle because it's not a circle, but a sort of a format where you're all sort of like in a group and facing each other and able to talk and have discussion. And the classes typically are about 5 to 12 students, sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less. And so these are small classes. And so it really is the case that you can't really just like hide in the back of the room and just listen to everybody else talk. So there's the expectation and the necessity really that students are going to be engaged in discussion, have done the readings ahead of time, and come prepared to class to talk about the readings. And this is what Danielle is talking about in terms of learning from each other and hearing the other opinions. And so there really is much more of the expectation that the students will take, like, this is more like you're taking ownership of your own learning as well. So it's not just professors sort of telling you things, as you being part of the discussion. And professors are obviously still there. I mean, as Danielle knows, we can't help but jump into these discussions because we find them so darn interesting, right? And we like to be part of these discussions as well. And so if you think about it, it's kind of like, it's just a bunch of nerds getting around talking about nerdy things. That's kind of really what it is, right? And so you're learning from the readings, but also from each other. And Danielle, so had you taken seminar courses at the undergrad level?
Um, not not necessarily like a seminar course, but I did take some, I guess, the further I got in my undergrad, there was more discussion in the classes, but I was that person who hid in the back of the class and just kind of listened and observed. So this was really intimidating and kind of daunting for me to. So my cohort was 5 people, so it was quite small. So nowhere for me to hide in the corner. But it really helped, I guess, break me out of my shell a little bit, just in terms of being comfortable speaking up, being comfortable talking about something that I maybe didn't know a lot about and that I was still learning about, asking questions without feeling, stupid, because I know that's a fear a lot of students have. It's a fear that I had is, oh, what are people going to say if I ask this question? Are they going to think I don't know anything? And that's definitely a fear that I had, but I think the program itself and the course format and just all of that together really provides that kind of safe space for students to learn and be wrong and talk about things that they don't know, because everybody's there to learn and everybody's at the same place, and you all just really want to generate a good discussion, whether it's answering questions, asking questions. So, just kind of being in that kind of space and getting comfortable in that space was a bit of an adjustment for me, but definitely something that I got more comfortable with as, we went throughout the program, and something that I learned to look forward to and enjoy. And,
That's
um, yeah, and doing the readings ahead obviously is required, but thinking of questions you want to ask. And the more you read, the more kind of critical you look at these different topics, or critically, I guess. And yeah, so it's really interesting just to kind of see the evolution of thinking and all of that throughout this. So I learned to really like the seminar class when I was not the seminar person beforehand.
and
And I think that's important to say because I think a lot of people probably feel the same way that I did. So,
yeah, no, well, I was gonna say, like, I appreciate you sharing that because I think there are some students who do get intimidated by the seminar classes. They're afraid of looking stupid, or like saying the quote unquote wrong thing. And so I'm glad to hear that your perspective as someone who didn't have that experience will say coming into it. And then a little bit intimidated at first, but then you got used to the format and actually grew to quite like it. So it's kind of like the evolution of the seminar class is
Yeah.
kind of built in there. That's great. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, so that's what the classes are like. A lot of discussion, and here's the thing. I mean, it's like everyone's gonna say something that maybe like everyone's gonna miss something at some point, or say something that's a little bit like maybe like out of left field or off base. But this is the place to do it, right? And so. Yeah, so it's good, getting comfortable, like offering opinions, talking about these readings, and having discussion with people who might disagree or offer different perspectives that you hadn't thought about before. And so that's all part of learning. Learning isn't just about being right, it's about exploring the ideas in an academic way, within the courses. And then we talk about some of the research topics. And so Danielle, maybe I'll sort of like go through the list, and you're going to see research topics because I've gone fancy and just animated them to show up like one at a time because that's the extent of my skill set with PowerPoint. But to give you some ideas about some of the research topics of our graduated students, and these include both thesis and KSP students. And so here's some examples of what our students have done for their theses and in KSPs. So non-consensual distribution of intimate imagery, also known as NCDII, impact of COVID-19 on prisons, impact of ideal victimhood on sentencing decisions, medical assistance in dying, intersection of homelessness, mental health, guardianship, and housing status, the impact of police culture on attitudes towards restorative justice, student perceptions of crime seriousness, making sense of conservation officer uses of emotional labor, incarceration and reentry for provincial prisoners, a survivor's narrative of institutional harms experienced in Manitoba Development Center and prisons in Canada, why do citizens request exemption from jury duty, and urban design neoliberalism and social control in the context of Winnipeg's Canada Life Center. And so here is the full list that I read out. That's not the entire list so far, but these are some of the topics that our students have actually decided to research. And Danielle, yours is like second from the bottom there.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I know that one.
Yes, it's like very, very familiar with that one. And this is just to give you a sense of kind of the topics our students have explored, the kinds of things that they've researched. And as Danielle said, you're going to be living and breathing this for like the better part of a couple of years. And so you want to make sure it's something even, that you're interested in. And sometimes students do have trouble picking a topic. I've been there as well because you find so many things interesting. It can be hard to actually just narrow down to one topic. And so you might just have to sort of pick something that seems interesting, keep some other ideas in your back pocket for down the road, and find something to go with, right? So this is to give you some inspiration, but this isn't limited, this isn't the only things that you can be looking at. Also, we'll talk a little bit about funding, and so money, it's a big thing. It costs money to go to school, it costs money to live. And so I will be upfront that unlike some of the larger universities, especially those in Ontario, we don't have a guaranteed minimum funding package. So the funding that we are able to offer varies from year to year. Typical offers would be somewhere in the $6,000 to $10,000 range. And funding offers are typically made up of a combination of internal scholarship money, and sometimes research assistant positions, or teaching assistant positions. And I've kind of put these in like, here's like something that would be, is generally a given. You will get usually some internal scholarship funds. RA and TA positions are different sources of funding. And there are also university level and external scholarships, and more on that on the next slide. For the internal scholarship funds, that's scholarship is scholarship. That's money that you're given. For the RA and TA positions, those may be part of a funding offer, but if not, you can always apply for those positions once you've been accepted to the program. And for those ones, it's basically you have to put in a certain amount of hours for a certain amount of money, kind of like a job, because those basically are job related positions. And as I mentioned, you can always apply for these positions. Faculty in our department are really, we're a very research heavy department, like not to brag or anything, but like we totally are. And faculty are always looking for RAs to hire. And so Danielle, I think you had the experience of, I mean, obviously, as you mentioned, you worked for me as a research assistant and a research associate, but you also worked for 2 or 3 other faculty. Maybe you can talk about that experience a little bit.
I did, yeah. So, like Dr. Bertrand said, different professors are always kind of looking for RAs or TAs. So I don't have experience working as a TA, but I did have a couple different RA positions. So yeah, it was just kind of a matter of checking the website, and again, your supervisor can show you where to look for these positions, and just kind of seeing what was available in the criminal justice department, or that was primarily the department I was looking at, just because that was the area that I was learning in. And yeah, so positions came up, and it's a good way to expand your skill set and just learn about different topics, and use different methodologies, that sort of thing. So that was kind of what I was looking for. So yeah, I got to kind of explore some new topics I wasn't familiar with, try some new things, learn some new things. So that was exciting too. And then that also is a source of funding, which is great being a grad student. So great experience wise, but also can help you pay for school. So that's definitely a plus.
I mean, that's what we call win-win.
Exactly.
Learning more skills and also making some money. And also, so to talk about scholarships. So I don't know if Danielle, if you heard, but this year, Shirk scholarships. Okay, the look on your face tells me you had not heard
Oh,
this. Um,
no.
so there are also scholarships that you can apply for both internally and externally. So SHIRC is the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada. As of this year, so last year, they were $17,500. This year they've been up to $27,000. And if I remember correctly, unless the rules have changed, scholarship money is non-taxable. So that's 27,000 sweet tax-free dollars. And also to keep in mind, incoming students can apply for these scholarships. So you are eligible to apply even if you're not currently a U of W student. You do have to be a domestic student to apply for these scholarships. But to be aware of is that most of the scholarship deadlines come before you know whether or not you've been accepted into the program. So for example, the deadline for SHIRK is December 1st, and some of these other scholarships, the alphabet soup ones, the other two, the PDGSS, the President's Distinguished Graduate Student Scholarship, and the University of Winnipeg Graduate Student Scholarship. Those deadlines are both around like March 1st. And Research Manitoba deadline is typically like mid-November-ish, I want to say. So if you're thinking that you might want to go to grad school, I'd say put in an application anyways, because again, here's fancy graphic incoming. 80% of our students have won at least one of these major awards. And so our students are very, very successful in getting these awards if they apply for them. And a couple of students have won more than one major award. So they say, for example, win a SHIRK in their first year, and then like a President's Distinguished Graduate Student Scholarship in their second year. So yeah, so big money for scholarships. And as Danielle said, makes a big difference in terms of enjoyment of school when you're not stressing about how to pay the bills. And when I was a graduate student, I can say I had some years where I was versus wasn't funded. And yes, stress is a lot different when you're, not when you have the scholarship funds, you're less likely to walk into the grocery store and feel anxiety thinking you can't afford anything in there anyways. So what's the point? So so we really encourage students to apply for scholarships. If you do have someone who's a trusted faculty member, whether it is at University of Winnipeg or if you're a different university, I strongly recommend getting your faculty supervisor, a faculty member to help you with your application, because that can make a really big difference. And so have to talk about tuition, obviously. So full-time domestic tuition, about $8,700, part-time domestic tuition, about $4,300, full-time international students, about $18,000. And this also on top of that, there's about $500 of fees per term, but it includes like the gym membership. It's the one you didn't sign up for, but that you can't get rid of, and also a bus pass. Just a little asterisk there for the international tuition. There's something called a tuition reciprocity agreement between Minnesota and Manitoba, which means that Minnesotans will pay domestic tuition fees as would a Canadian student. And also, if you're looking at those numbers and feeling a little like, those are paid across 3 terms. So they're split into about 3 equal-ish chunks. And so you'd pay in the fall, the winter, and the spring, summer term, as opposed to paying all at once. And so if you want more information about tuition and fees, that's on the Graduate Studies website. An important also, but sometimes overlooked consideration in where to go to school is the cost of living in the cities of the schools that you're considering. And the reason why I like to plug this is because it turns out, luckily for us, Winnipeg is one of the cheapest cities in Canada to live in. And the October rentals report, so I've given the link there if you want to go check out the information yourself. Sorry, this is the August, not the October rent report. And it shows that Winnipeg is the 31st out of 35 most expensive cities to live, which means we are the fourth cheapest essentially. And a one bedroom apartment in Winnipeg in August was going for about $1,400. Vancouver and Toronto, you can see it's about double that price. So if you look at the difference in terms of rent in Winnipeg versus Toronto, Vancouver, and if you add up those differences in the monthly rent on average over 12 months, it makes an apartment in Winnipeg about $14,000 to $16,000 cheaper for 1 year. And that doesn't take into account the other aspects of your cost of living. Also, it'll be a lot faster and easier to get around in Winnipeg than it will be in either Toronto or Vancouver. So it might be the case that other schools offer more funding, but they are much, much more expensive places to live. So sometimes it comes out almost even, or Winnipeg might even come out ahead just because of how gosh darn cheap we are compared to some of the bigger cities. Also, there's a lot to do in Winnipeg. So for those of you who are from Winnipeg, I know when I was like about 18, 19, I was just like, "Ugh, there's nothing to do here." But it turns out there is a lot to do in Winnipeg. There's festivals, there's concerts, there's theater, there's sports, there's restaurants, there's museums. We have a zoo. Winnipeg is also pretty well known for punching above our weight food-wise, both in having really good restaurants, having a wide variety of cuisines. Also, there's lots of free things to do. If you're like, yeah, that's great, but those look expensive. Lots of free things to do. If you go to the Tourism Winnipeg website, they have a whole list of free activities. This is just a small sampling of them. Danielle, what other kinds of things do students like to do?
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at just all of these options here, which are all really great ones. The Forks, I think, is like the Winnipeg staple tourist area, which is located not too far from campus, actually.
Mhm.
And really great skating trail in the winter down the river. Lots of cute little shops, really great food there actually.
Mhm.
So lots of options. I'm also looking, so these are all located right. Okay, I do see Birds Hill Provincial Park. Okay, so not everything is like a Winnipeg option, but Birds Hill Provincial Park is located a little bit outside of Winnipeg, and it's if you'd like to go on walks and stuff, I wouldn't say it's super intense hiking with hills and stuff like that, because we
Like
just
hills in
have that.
Manitoba are relative.
Yeah. But it's really beautiful. There's a lot of trails there. Pine Ridge Hollow is there, which is kind of like an outdoor market. There's also a restaurant. They do farmers markets there. So that's a really cool thing. There's animals outside, which is
Yeah.
cool. We love that. But no, these are all really great options. If you like to be outside, like there's a lot of really great walking areas, just even scenic areas to kind of just take in
Mhm.
the views, despite Winnipeg being, or I guess Manitoba as a whole being flat, people think it's boring. It's really beautiful. You just have to find the right places.
Oh, it is. Well, and it's funny you mentioned like, animals outside because like depending what area of the city you live in, like there's rabbits everywhere. I
Yep.
also have two geese that have taken up residence on my front lawn. And
Dangerous.
I know it's like if anyone's heard the term like cobra chicken, that's what Canadian geese are sometimes called, or cobra chickens. And they're kind of like that. They can be kind of nasty, but you just give them a wide berth and they're typically okay. And you've talked before, Danielle, that grad studies has a lot of like free things like that grad studies host. Like, can you talk about those a bit?
Yeah, so how could I forget those? So what did we do? It was sort of like a quiz. Or trivia, it was trivia. So we were in different teams. So there's different grad programs at U of W, and each program kind of formed a team, and we did trivia, and they had snacks for us, and that was in the science building on campus. So that was a really cool thing. And that kind of lets you get to know your cohort a little bit. And sometimes you can get to know, other students in different programs, and just kind of branch out that way a little bit. So I was a local student, so it's not like I was moving here. I grew up here, so that's a little bit different, but that's especially helpful, I think, for students who are coming in from out of town and maybe don't know too many people or that sort of thing. That's a great way to make friends too, and just kind of, yeah, just branch out and do something new. What else did we do?
Did
We've
you
gotten together. I guess we went pardon me, sorry?
do the pumpkin carving?
I didn't do that one.
Okay.
No, I don't know if anyone in my cohort could make it to that one, but we didn't do that. But even outside of that, we got together as a cohort.
Yeah.
So we did that and we spent some time together, and that's really nice too. And I would really encourage, I guess, incoming students to get to know the people in your cohort. And
Yeah.
these are all people that you're going to be spending a lot of time with, first of all. And secondly, you will have similar interests, and that's important for bonding as well. So, yeah, that's a really fun thing. But I know that there were other events and things like that that grad studies put on for grad students. I didn't make it to all of them, obviously, but yeah, I would encourage students to go check those out as well because they're really fun, and you get to know people and just get out and do something. So that's nice too.
Yes, and also that's on the list of free activities as well.
Yes.
And I will say to you, like grad studies does host different like skill building workshops. So they have like resumes or like writing stuff or study tips or stress management, all the things that you could need to be a grad student. Yeah, that's great. Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit as well about the minimum eligibility requirements. And so, in terms of what you need to be eligible to enter into our program, so we prefer that students have a bachelor's honors degree. Or a 4-year bachelor's degree will be considered for really exceptional students. And if so there are some programs where they don't offer honors degrees. And so you're like, all I have is a 4-year bachelor's. What do I do? Right. And so what we look for, like for even for the students who do have the honors degrees is to have, a good GPA. So you have to have a minimum of a 3.0 out of 4.5 to be eligible for consideration. But that doesn't mean if you meet that threshold, you're going to get in because it is a competitive process. So what you can do, regardless of whether you have a 4-year bachelor's or an honors, is to make yourself more competitive by taking 4th-year level courses, especially seminar-based courses. Also getting some research experience, for example, working as a research assistant or a teaching assistant. And this will make sure that you can actually then get like a really good, strong letter of reference from a professor who can really speak to your capabilities in terms of, how likely you are to succeed in grad school. We do prefer that candidates have a social science background. So, for example, criminal justice, psychology, or sociology. If you do not have a social science background, you would have to demonstrate in your application how you would be able to succeed in a social science master's. So, because we are a interdisciplinary program, we are open to saying like, hey, there are some people where maybe your home discipline, your skill set is different, but you have experience and interest in a criminal justice area. But it is incumbent upon you as an applicant to make that case that you would be able to succeed in a social science master's. And as I said, it's a competitive process. We accept about 7 or 8 students per year, sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less. So just meeting those minimum requirements does not guarantee that you are going to get in. And so Danielle, you came from a psych background. I mean, as did I, right? But can you talk a little bit about what it was like as someone who came from outside of a criminal justice discipline into a criminal justice master's?
Yeah, for sure. So that was again something that was like a little bit scary going in because I didn't have that, foundational knowledge of criminal justice going through that undergraduate stream, that some of my peers had. But I think that helped me learn because there was more for me to learn. And I was maybe able to offer a different perspective coming from psych, and I was able to learn a different perspective from some of the other students. And I think one of the other students had a history background as well. So there was another perspective coming from there. And then I think some of the courses that I took were cross-listed with some of the other programs. So then there were students taking them from other programs. So I think, instead of having a different educational background being something that's kind of scary, and that's kind of how I was feeling at the beginning again. But I think it's an exciting and it's kind of a cool thing to be able to just, I don't know how to put it to words, but it allows for a different sort of learning experience because you're bringing a different perspective, but then you're also gaining different perspectives. So having, being in that interdisciplinary program, you're in a space that allows for that. And it's not that things are more complicated or confusing because you're coming from a different background. Educationally, it just allows you to learn differently. And I think it really, again, fostered a lot of interesting conversations and discussions and writing and stuff like that. So it was a pretty smooth transition, and it it was great. So I think, yeah, I was able to learn a lot and kind of have some good discussions with my classmates. So that was
Okay.
kind of a really long-winded version of that, but
Oh, I really like the way that you put it, and I think the sort of the phrase that you used about allows you to bring something different, but also learn something different. I think that's really kind of that's a really great way to look at it in terms of what you bring, but also what you gain by having all these different perspectives. Yeah, so that was great. And then in terms of the application requirements, so there's a standard application form where you have to fill out your name and your address and et cetera and so on. We also ask for a few pieces of writing. So there's a narrative statement basically about, why are you applying to this program? Why do you want to come to this program? A research project or a thesis proposal. So that's sort of either like the KSP or the thesis proposal to say kind of like what your interests are, like what you would like to do. And this is short, it's about like 500 words. We also ask you to give the name of the faculty member who you'd like to work with as your supervisor. Also ask for transcripts, your curriculum vitae, writing sample, and we prefer it to be from an upper year course if possible. And preferably if it's something that's marked up, although we know that doesn't always happen nowadays. So something with like where we can see the grade that you got on the paper. Also, 2 academic letters of reference. And so I get a question as a grad chair, I do get questions. I was like, well, if I don't have any academic references, can my boss give me a reference? And what I always say to that is like, if it's possible to get, someone who's taught you at the university level to write your academic letters of reference, that's always preferable because what we're interested in having the referees comment on is your ability to succeed in a graduate program. And so your boss can probably speak to things about like your work ethic, in general sort of personality kind of things that may reflect well in terms of a graduate application, but they wouldn't be able to comment on things like your ability to do master's level work or your research ability or things like that. So if it's the case, however, that's all you can get are references from your boss, that's what you go with, right? So you have to have 2 academic letters of reference or 2 letters of reference. Much strongly preferred that they're academic. But if all you can get are from your boss or some other type of thing, like let's say you volunteer for a community organization or something like that, where you work in a community organization. However you get those letters of reference, that's up to you. But again, the preference is for academic letters of reference. Also, if your first language is not English, there is an English requirement. And so you can look on the university's webpage to find out what they are in terms of the scores. The deadlines for September, oh, that should be September 2025 start. I was like, oh, and then I'm like wondering, can I edit this on the fly so that I can change it to September of 2025 to make sure I've got correct information out there. Okay, so let's see if I'm, says like I'm being asked for technological. Did it change?
Yeah, it did.
Okay, I mean, you're surprised as I am that I was able to change it properly. But there we go. Okay, so it has been changed. So for September 2025 start, applications will open November 1st this year, 2024, and they will close February 1st, 2025. And then the big question is, okay, like a master's degree is a big time and money investment. And so, obviously you want to make sure that you're getting something out of this if you're going to do it. And so the question is, what can you do with a criminal justice master's? Well, one of the things you can do is you could actually go on to do a PhD. And the PhD programs our students have entered so far have been criminology at Simon Fraser, or Fraser, not Fraser, Queen's University in the sociology department, and the University of Alberta sociology department. So we have already sent a few of our students on to PhD programs. Other things you can do is find a job, basically, right? So if you're just like, you know what, the master's was enough. I don't feel like there's anything that I want to do that I need a PhD for, at least at this point, then it makes sense that you're going to be looking to find employment. And so a master's degree will typically facilitate entry into mid to higher level government positions requiring analytical or research skills, such as a policy analyst, Danielle, a researcher, an intelligence analyst. These kinds of jobs are things that having a master's degree will make you well suited for. You can also do higher level work in community-based organizations, or you can work with faculty on their own research. As an example of some of the jobs our graduated students have gotten, research associate with CJ faculty, federal fraud investigator, policy analyst for the provincial government or the federal government, constable with the Winnipeg Police Service, a researcher for the Manitoba Advocate for Children and Youth, or a performance audit student with the Auditor General of Manitoba. And so Danielle, maybe I'll ask you a question again in terms of, so obviously you just recently went through the job application process and successfully got a job with the provincial government. And can you maybe talk a little bit about like how do you think the master's degree impacted like the jobs you applied for and the jobs that you were eligible for?
Yeah, so I think the jobs I was looking at, I guess that kind of were able to, that I guess my education kind of led me to, I guess I would say. A lot of them require a bachelor's degree, so they don't necessarily require a master's degree. So I think that's part of what is definitely helpful in applying for jobs, is that having that master's degree kind of puts you, um, I guess maybe in a different kind of step, because you have those different skills and the different, um, I guess, analytical abilities, that sort of thing, because that's what your research experience, whether it's the KSP or a thesis, that's you were using those skills that whole time, and that kind of process helped you get them. So I found that the requirements or the asset qualities that a lot of these jobs wanted were things that I had learned as a graduate student and as a research associate or research assistant before that. So things like critical thinking and ability to work with large data sets and, even statistical analyses, that sort of thing. So things that you're going to be doing regularly as a grad student or an RA, I guess that research assistant or research associate, those are skills that you can carry over to a lot of different positions. So I found that throughout my education and my RA experience that, um, I was essentially building a skill set, and that's how I like to look at it, is that, I was building these different skills and learning these new things that I could apply to a bunch of different settings. So it's not like you're kind of tied into one sort of job. There's a lot of opportunities out there, like this list. Um, there's much more to it. Obviously, it's not just this list that, in terms of jobs that are available. But I think having the master's really just even helped me with confidence in terms of being confident in what I was talking about. You know, you become really knowledgeable in a topic, and that sort of thing. Doing a thesis defense, um, again, public speaking and answering questions on the fly really helped with, the interview process. And so it's again building that skill set that you can carry over into, not, I guess, the application process, the interview process, and then a job setting as well. So um, yeah, I felt really prepared going into applying for jobs. It wasn't like I was looking at jobs where, oh no, I don't have this and this and this. And of course, you're not gonna have every single required quality or skill on a job posting, but the skills that you do have and that you will have, being a grad student or finishing grad school, are things that can definitely help you learn new skills and, set that foundation and set you up to succeed in the workplace. So
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah. So that for anyone listening to this, like that'll give you a sense about, where the master's degree is going to be an advantage for you and the kind of skills that you're going to learn in our program specifically. And so I think we've covered everything that we wanted to cover. And so I'll just say, if you do have any questions, if you go to just the general criminal justice website, you can find out more about the faculty. You can see kind of the oh, here we go. I found my pointer. The faculty and staff. And if you want to find out more about our graduate program and courses, we do have a pretty extensive set of information right here in the graduate programs and courses. We also have a bunch of FAQs that are based on the questions that we've gotten from prospective students and from current students. We've also got a lot of information on there about, if you look under the information for future students tab, that'll show information for students who are thinking about applying. And if you look under the current students, that actually gives you a lot of detail about the nuts and bolts of the program. So we've really filled in the website a lot. And if you look on the website and you still have more questions, feel free to shoot me an email. My email is m.bertrand, Bertrand, @uwinnipeg.ca. So thanks everyone for your attention today, and take care. And like I said, if you do have questions, you can feel free to send me an email afterwards.